Hello, everyone. I hope all of you can hear me well. Please let me know if you can't. Bronwyn raised her hand. Sorry, just skipping ahead. My name is Kirsten, and I'm resident dog trainer for Bauer Meow. I'm also working in digital marketing for Bauer Meow, but I train dogs for like now over 10 years, and I've worked nationally and internationally. And at Bauer Meow, we've been insuring pets since 2008, and I think it's now over 160,000 Australian pets that we've insured, that we've been insuring. So yeah, it's a big number, lots of experience, and I really welcome every one of you today to our webinar about the terrible or not so terrible teens. I really wanted to put the not so before it, because they are actually not as bad as we think. Just a couple of housekeeping things, guys. I tried to, sorry, there's a Q&A. Okay, brilliant. So Sandy started to put a question in. So what we're going to do with the questions, guys, is please put them in the Q&A section. We probably go through the presentation first, and then we're going to address the Q&As at the end, if that's okay. We might run a little bit over. We'll see how we go. I'll try to keep it to half an hour, but let's... So yeah, put your questions into the Q&A section. Thank you, Sandy. And I will go through them at the end. So let's get right into it, guys. I think the reason most of you are attending today is you either have a dog who's in the terrible teens, or you had a dog that went through the terrible teens, or you might just have one that is about to enter them, or you're just interested into how you can counteract, or you might be interested in how you can counteract some of your dog's behaviors, thinking maybe they are still in their teens, but they shouldn't be. So many reasons for why you would attend this seminar. So let me start with a couple of quotes that I really like. One is from Nicola Davis, a dog trainer. She got interviewed for The Guardian in the US, and she said, moody, unpredictable, and with a striking disregard for the rules, teenagers can be hard to handle. Now it turns out the same is true for adolescent dogs. The other one is from Virginia Morrill. Like teenagers whose bodies flow with hormones and whose brains are rewired during puberty, adolescent dogs can disregard and disobey their owners. So this is two very, very true statements that I really like. I think a lot of times we struggle with understanding why our cute little puppy that was very malleable, very sweet, followed us around in the park, never ran off, suddenly at a pretty young age, while it probably still looks like a puppy, it turns into almost like a gremlin overnight. So let's talk a little bit about the biology and the neuroscience around adolescence. This is a part that I really want everyone to have a bit of understanding on what is actually going on. So adolescence starts when our puppy becomes a young dog. When they actually are not such a puppy, a toddler anymore, they really become a young teenager. So it starts usually with when the adult teeth come through, is around about 4 months, can also be 5 months, some as late as 6, but mostly around 4 or 5 months. And this phase lasts until they are fully adults. The puberty, however, describes more the part where of the sexual maturing of the dog. So it lasts generally around 6 to 12. It starts around 6 to 12 months. It's a bit depending on the breed and the size. As we know, bigger breeds mature much slower, start a bit later than smaller breeds. This phase lasts around 6 to 12 months, can go up to about 2 years. Again, this is depending on the breed, the size, and the individual dog. If you have any questions around this in more detail, a good idea is always to contact your breeder and ask them, what sort of the common the common gist in their certain breeding lines, if you are interested in a bit more detail for your specific dog. The neuroscience and the biology is very, very important during that period, because what happens is the same happens in humans as well, is that the limbic system develops with a higher priority, and this part of the brain is highly involved into emotions and reward seeking. It prioritizes the importance of survival and behavioral responses. And it's also highly involved in the processes that regard to learning and memory. On the other part, however, the prefrontal cortex is just very limited, or quite limited in its development. And this is the part that is responsible for rational thinking, for problem solving, for things like self-control, for emotional control, for focus, for planning. So everything that is quite impulsive, emotional, behaviorally very fast driven is developing very fast and with high priority. And then everything that sort of balances that out is a bit of, on the back foot of development during this phase. What it means for the dog's behavior is that it's actually not much different from teenagers, from human teenagers, as you think. So erratic behavior, overexcitement, high arousal, moodiness, inconsistencies in learning and the retaining of skills and learned things, overly confident, next moment overly fearful. So these are all things, they happen with human teenagers as well as they happen with our dogs. And it's very important for us to understand that a little bit, that it's not a dog. Sometimes it's just not them trying to be naughty. It's just the phase, the hormones, the neurobiology, the proteins that go through the body. So that is something that they sometimes just can't really help themselves. Physically, what it means is we often have dogs that either might still look like a puppy, and they are actually not a puppy anymore, or they already look like adults, or much like an adult, but their brain is not yet there. So I see this quite often happen with especially with larger breeds, when they hit about a year and a half. Some of them, they look already quite mature, but their brain is so far away from being there. So they might be more energetic. On the other hand, their bones are not fully developed. So their growth plates are still closing. Their joints are not yet fully there. The sex hormones are surging. The reproductive hormones, testosterone and estrogen is what we're referring to. And then they have growth spurts, so you probably, some of you might know that, they grow and then they sort of plateau for a little bit, and suddenly they start to gain on height again, or then they start to fill out a little bit. So there's all these spurts. And again, if you talk to your dog's breeder, they can sometimes give you a good indication what is going on in this particular line of breeding. Then another phase that I wanted to talk about with regard to the biology and the neuroscience is that we often see what we call fear periods in dogs during the development from a puppy when they are born until about when they are adults. But the one that is quite important during the adolescence is what we call the second fear period. It's what we call the adolescent fear period, and it lasts around 2 weeks. A lot of the experience that we have is less based on like a lot of research and scientific evidence, but a lot is about experience that was gathered over time. And this second fear period often comes up between 6 to 18 months of age. The first one are quite often, if there are multiple, the first one quite often comes around puberty. And it describes the sudden fear of things that used to be okay. And this quite often catches owners a bit off guard. So let's say, your puppy was fine walking along the street in your neighborhood, and people with hats and hoods and skateboards and everything came up. And suddenly one day to another, they start to freak out about men with hats, or they might start to freak out about shopping trolleys. So they've walked past the same supermarket for the last 4 months without any problems. And so this is something that passes, but again, referring back to the brain structures that we talked before, this can also leave a lasting impact in a sense that learning has been taken away from this. So what I tried to do during this period is I called it with I tried to lay low a little bit. I avoid overexposure to the things that my dog might find a bit off-putting. I'm very prepared. So as soon as I can see, I think there's a bit of a shift in behavior, when I go out of the door, I have treats on me, or I might have my dog's toy. I'm prepared to sort of be a bit more aware of my surroundings, to distract my dogs if there's something that is fearful to my dog. I might counter condition, but I also have an attitude of I got you, without me trying to reaffirm their fear. So I don't want to go oh, I'm so sorry, there's a shopping trolley, let's all freak out about it. It's more okay, let's get away from here. I got a treaty here, and maybe for the next couple of weeks, we just walk a different route and avoid this all about. So kind of, I try to, as I said, lay low a little bit, knowing that it passes. There's always, for you the chance to contact your local dog trainer or behaviorist and kind of ask them to help you out a little bit. And so coming to the next topic, guys, is about how do we live with an adolescent dog? So there is, most of you find probably, if you sign up for this webinar, it's probably, out of interest, of course, but also because this is when quite often behavior issues start. Common behavioral challenges we see during that period is excessive barking, could be territorial driven, fear driven, boredom. They grow into their role is a big one. So for example, you might have had this German Shepherd puppy that was super sweet in puppy school, loved everyone, was extremely social, happy-go-lucky, and suddenly he's about a year old and he patrols along your hallway, barks at everyone who walks past the front door, tells them to take their hat off, to walk slower, to walk faster. And he basically found his sheriff head, put it on, and he's now doing his job. So especially with purpose-bred dogs, you often see them starting with adolescents fall a bit more into their role of bringing out the traits of the role that they were bred for. Then onset of aggression and reactive behaviors in a social context. I've just limited here to people and other dogs, but could also be any other animals in that sense. But this is quite common to come out. So for example, what we often see is that, for example, a puppy may have been attacked in the dog park as a puppy. Maybe it was at the vet and needed treatment. Maybe it was just a scare, but it was all sort of fine for months and weeks after played with other dogs, and suddenly that dog turns about a year old or a year and a half and becomes reactive to other dogs. So kind of we see that quite common. So that's when a dog starts to learn that they also can do something about things in their life. And again, referring back to the brain development, this is where erratic behaviors, where emotions, where fast acting based on emotion, such behaviors come out. Sudden fearful behaviors, again, fear period, but could also be outside of the fear period. Other behavior challenges can be humping, can be sexually or socially driven. They start marking for can be male and female dogs as well. They might not listen, the loss or the lack of obedience here, naughty behaviors, we call them often. they're starting to test the limits, same like, you know, like human teenagers, where we go like, hey, we just want to see how far this bandwidth goes. And this is not that they want to upset their owner in any way, but it's just them finding their place and like what is okay, what is not. And obviously they are seeking rewards. So kind of finding the best outcome for themselves is probably something they're really interested in. Boredom comes up. This is like when we often talk about, oh my God, my dog is so energetic. Destructive behaviors is also something that you often see coming up. So how do I work on this now? How do I live with my adolescent dog? Well, I guess the biggest one for me is quite often management will go a long way. And I tell you, it will go a very, very long way. The first thing is probably to not give your dog opportunities to rehearse the unwanted behavior. So let's take our German Shepherd, who just learned that he can put his sheriff hat on and, you know, bark at everyone at the door. So I would probably crate train that dog. I wouldn't give him any unsupervised access to the door, or like I would put baby gates in place. I would probably think about when do I have to leave my front door, sort of a fly screen door, open so that he has access to this area. I just, you know, I might crate train him, put baby gates in place. So things like this, just do a bit of training with him in the front yard, where I teach him cues to sort of stay calm in that environment. So for example, go on your mat and lay there and know you're not the boss of my house. I want my dogs to have clear and consistent rules. So if for example, if I want so simple things sometimes is like not letting your dog push the boundaries. So for example, my dogs, they are not allowed to jump out of the car. You're going to stay in there until you are allowed to come out. And little rules like this will sometimes teach the dogs, even they may not be life-threatening, or they may not be like super necessary at that point of time, or they may not directly address the issue of barking, but they will generally put you in a role where your dog learns that, you know, you make the rules, and this is quite important for them, and that you are in a sense a fair leader that they can sort of trust and in a way follow, and that you are consistent with what you are asking for. Avoid overstimulating activities, #ball addict. So I often see these behaviors of you know, the chasing of dopamine, the chasing of rewards, the chasing of excitement, the chasing of adrenaline. So that's quite common during this adolescent phase. So let's say your dog, your puppy may have played with other dogs in the park, a bit of zoomies. They may become a bit more intense during puberty because they just get so hyped up. I personally, I really, really want you to be aware of these overstimulating activities, because your puppy catapults their brain a little bit into a phase where they really cannot think through well, and it is up to you to manage that a little bit, to step in before they lose the ability to think through or listen to you when you want to call them. So in any of these behaviors that really tap into that dopamine release, they get very easily addictive. So #ball addict. Again, this is something that classically often gets built during puberty or during adolescence. Set foundations in puppyhood. So if your dog is still in a earlier puppy stage, it's like 3, 4, 5 months old, I lay a lot of the foundations that I can then use during adolescence. So I teach them, for example, to be tied up next to my desk for, let's say, half an hour. And with the puppy, I might, take the puppy out of its playpen, toilet them, bring them back, and then sit on my desk, tie them up next to my desk and on their bed, and just, have them there with me for half an hour. And they might go, oh, I actually don't want that now. I want to walk around. I'm like, no, you can't right now. Come on, just, we're going to chill out now. And they settle quite quickly. However, once that dog is an adolescent and has never done an exercise like this, you're probably going to have a little bit of a bigger fight on your hands at a point for the dog to say, hey, okay, you know, I can't do this right now. I'm just going to accept that. So you probably get a bit more of a pushback. So the earlier you can put certain foundations in place, the better. Dog parks is always a big topic. If you had contact with a dog trainer so far, they probably all go, oh, avoid dog parks. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of them. However, many of us live in highly populated areas, and dog parks are pretty much something that we can't really avoid. So if you go to a dog park and you can't avoid them, now I want you to strongly moderate the interactions your dog has, and maybe go at times that are a bit more quiet. Again, think about what the brain is looking for. The brain is looking for crazy stuff, and just because we, just because it is looking for it, that doesn't mean that it's always healthy. Very important is to remember repetition strengthens behavior. The more your dog does something, the more this behavior gets patterned, and also the emotional response to it. So this is a very, very important one. If you want to get rid of a behavior, then don't give your dog the opportunity to repeat it. Training is key. Training is super important. Keep up an obedience regime. Maybe to sign up to a local obedience club or to a dog school. Even if you go once a week, great. If you can only do it fortnightly and do a bit of training at home, well, that's better than nothing. But to have training on a regular basis is, I think it's super important, and it's really going to help you guys forward. Schedule some regular training activities, something that might also not be about going totally crazy, something that helps your dog a little bit to focus and to moderate that brain activity. So nose work and tricks are some really, really nice ones here. Again, encourage the use of the thinking part of their brain, because that at the moment is a little bit on the back foot. Train the behaviors you need your dog to know. So very important is something like come when called, is a leave it command. So for them to not engage with something, but engage with you or look back at you. Train the leash walking. Important again, stick to your rules. If you have rules, don't let them push you around. Consistency is also fairness for your dog, and it helps them to learn much, much faster if we don't move around in a gray area. Teenagers are opportunists. Remember, so are human teenagers. You give a finger, they take the whole hand. And some teenagers might be worse, others are, might be better. I was probably not a great teenager, so my parents were probably quite happy when I was out of it. But this is something, you really want to keep in mind. And remember, a dog's obedience is only as good as its training. So talk about socialization. Socialize your dog, but do it wisely. Be mindful of the second fear period and the potential single event learning. Single event learning is what we sometimes see from fear periods, is they have one event, and that event will be remembered forever. Keep your dog's emotions and his headspace in mind and in check when socializing. And, it's quite normal. You might find that your dog has a friend they got along with as puppy, and tomorrow they are not friends anymore. It doesn't mean that they hate each other. Some of them, they might start hating each other, but some of them, they might just ignore each other, and that is normal. We humans do the same. So we become socially, we change our social circle. All right, so that was about the about living with an adolescent dog. So now I want to touch base on a topic, and there was someone asking for it, how desexing affects the hormones. So I'm just going to come to that. Desexing, in a way, plays also a quite important role on during this phase, and your dog might already be desexed, or you might think about desexing. And we as trainers get often asked about the effects of desexing, how it affects behavior. So for example, will desexing stop my dog's aggressive behavior? look, this is very much depending on, also depending on what hormones what drives the aggressive behavior. So for example, we know that some behaviors are more driven by cortisol. So for example, behaviors that are food aggression, fear aggression, territorial aggression, also separation anxiety is very cortisol driven. So when you think about that, cortisol, so the reproductive hormones, testosterone and estrogen, they are like almost like balancing out cortisol a little bit, like they counteract cortisol a bit. So when they are gone, the percentage of cortisol obviously increases in the body. So if the behaviors are not driven by these reproductive hormones, desexing will probably not make them better, potentially make them worse, depending. We often call testosterone and estrogen a bit like the confidence hormones. So it will also a bit play an important role of when you desex them. So when you start to mess a little bit with your dog's and with your dog's brain chemistry, will desexing improve my dog's toilet training? Can be not. Like if your dog is a really massive marker, has just started marking, you know, maybe desexing can help a bit. But if they've been marking for a while, my German Spitz was desexed at the age of 2. He was a big marker before, and he's a big marker since, so he just enjoys that a lot. Also, for example, toilet training can be, desexing can have an effect. So for example, we know that female dogs that are desexed early can have more of a tendency towards like a UTIs. So there are effects of desexing, but will it improve your dog's toilet training? Maybe not. Will my entire dog, male dog, get attacked less once it's desexed? So we often see that young male dogs that are still entire in their prime, they get attacked by other dogs, quite often by desexed male dogs or male dogs that were desexed late. So this is something, yeah, that's probably going to improve once these hormones have settled about 5 weeks after desexing. You know, yeah, that might get better, but you might run into other things that come up as an effect of desexing. Will desexing improve my dog's health? Maybe not. So there is effects of, I mentioned the UTIs before that come through desexing. Of course, if you desex a female and you take the ovaries and the uterus out, they can't get tumors on these organs. So this is, you know, there are benefits on one side, but they also found that dementia, senior dementia in dogs can increase in desexed female dogs because the estrogen usually helps a little bit to counteract the development of Alzheimer. So there's been studies that have been done less so much always with dogs, but also around humans a lot. So, and we kind of take a lot of knowledge from that. And yeah, so the question is, make an informed decision about what is right for you and your dog. Talk to your breeder, talk to your vet, you know, maybe read a bit about it yourself. And brings me also to show you a couple of options to just, you know, there's more than one option than you think in regards to desexing. So there is the traditional options of desexing where we remove the gonads. So the gonads is the organs that produce the reproductive hormones, the estrogen, the testosterone. So usually for females, we take out the uterus and the ovaries, and for males, we remove the testicles. However, there are also options. So these are the most common methods. And however, there are also options that leave the gonads in place where we don't remove them. And if you say, look, I just want to test the waters a little bit, I want to see if, you know, how my dog responds to something or not, then there's also ways of doing that. They could be either be on a surgical base or on a chemical base. And these are options that you can obviously also discuss with your vet. And quickly, we are going really well for times. I already got a few Q&As, but my quick summary here, guys, is surviving the terrible teens. Yes, the not so terrible teens. Management is important, guys. It's so important. Even if you would hardly train, management will get you a long way. You got to be the adult when they don't make sensible decisions, and when they are dopamine chasing, help them manage their arousal. You know, we often think about like, oh my God, my puppy is so excited. My puppy is so energetic. I need them out. I need to take them out 20 times a day and let them run with like 500 dogs in the park. And he needs to have crazy zoomies. I can tell you, no, he doesn't. If we push always for more, they will ask for more, and we'll probably have a crazy dog at the end. So kind of, it's up to you to manage that thinking in their brain a little bit. And, you know, don't feel bad about it. If they play with the dog for like 10 minutes and then you say, hey, I can see things are about to go a little bit crazy, I call them back, put the leash on, you know, go home, get them their dinner in a snuffle mat, and they will be as happy. They will not love you less just because you took them away from the dog park a few minutes earlier. Again, don't let them rehearse behaviors, and especially the emotions that come with it that you don't like. Remember, they might always want to party, but it's not healthy. Engage their brain in a sensible way. Teach them impulse control and obedience. So there are great ways to sort of sometimes remind your puppy that, you know, there is a bit more that we can do than just, you know, being like a Red Bull superstar, action superstar, and just ride on the wave of dopamine. Then if your dog isn't already desexed, make an informed decision on desexing about the if, the how, and the whens. And probably the biggest takeaway, guys, for me is be patient with your dog and with yourself. Have a bit of understanding. They are not trying to be, you know, bad dogs or trying to make your life hard. Same like we humans as teenagers, sometimes we could not help ourselves. And, you know, we can reflect back and go like, oh my God, the things that I did to my parents. They can't really do that. But, you know, there's an end to the not so terrible teens, but we want to make sure that they get out of the terrible teens with as little damage as possible. And so do you. So thank you very much, guys. I'm going to start going through the Q&As now. And again, if any one of you needs to drop off here, we run a little over time, please feel free. This whole webinar is recorded, and I will share a link after. So Sandy's asking, my dog will sometimes randomly at other times to get what he wants jump on me, and sometimes also pulls my scarf. It doesn't seem playful. So when he's greeting me when I come home, instead it feels like he's dominating me. I've tried to affirm get off. It doesn't work. I've tried having him sit. And right after he sits, he will get mounting or jumping on me. He's 61. He's a Samoyed. Look, Sandy, Samoyeds are like they are a fun breed, and they are little thrill chasers and fun seekers. So look, what I would do is I would basically I would teach him what it means when I wear a scarf, or I would get him to sit, and then I would, you know, put my scarf on, lean down, and teach him that when I do these certain behaviors, you can hold your sit position, for example. I would also tell him, I would also teach him a leave it command. So leave it means, hey, I know what you're about to do. Quite if you, for example, put up a camera and or phone and you video yourself in a situation, so where you might be able to replicate the actual sequence of events, you can probably see the moment before he actually starts to do that behavior. So kind of, we can see them, you know, they eyeball, they start to shift their body forward, or some of them, they get like, they open their eyes, just they go like, oh, I'm about to. So kind of, and I like to catch them before they do something, because once they've done something, once they start, for example, humping me, or they pull my scarf, or they are naughty, they already have a moment of gratification. They're like, well, I did that. That was so much fun. And so kind of, I tell them to leave it, stop that, don't even think about it. That's a really, so I wouldn't give them the opportunity. The other thing is, what I do is when I tell them, let's say I tell them, leave it, don't do it, and then they decide they still do it, I will probably, I might put them in the crate for like an hour, or put them on the other side of the baby gate, no toys, no food. You know, I put them away, or I tie them up for an hour. They've lost their liberty. Some it's really like their liberty. And I go, well, that's a punishment for it. Sorry, dude, that was not cool. A few years ago, I was with my Spitz in a dog park, and he basically chased another dog where I told him to leave it. I said, you know, don't do that. And he said, well, he looked at me and he said, well, I will. And off he ran. I said, come back. He didn't come back. So I went and I grabbed him and we went straight home. And what he did is he went for an undesexed male dog. And so we went straight home. There was no friendly word on the walk home. At home, I put him for 2 hours in the crate. So there's probably, the punishment for him blowing me off was pretty much, we go straight home and you go in your crate, and there's no fun for a couple of hours. And next day I came back, went to the same park, the same dog was there. I told my dog, leave it. And he sort of looked at me, tested the limits a little bit. And I was like, no, you better leave that. He was like, okay. And then we left the situation because I knew that the other dog was a trigger for him. But, you know, he got to play, he got engagement, some training with me for leaving that. I hope that helped. Then desexing and hormones, I think we talked about that. Frank is asking, my wife's dog, 3-year-old puppy, started showing tendencies to be overconfident, over fearful around adolescent age. Interestingly, he only like this when she's at home. Other times he's fine. My question is, you think he could be resource guarding? Happens mostly when she sits on the couch. Yeah, it could be. It's probably something, you know, there might be, sometimes we call it like learned behaviors, where we don't really know exactly when and how it started, but there is a pattern of behavior that suddenly came up that may not entirely make sense. But resource guarding is a common one. If she only sits on the couch, maybe he resource guards the couch. We probably would need to see in the context. He might resource guard your wife. He may have gotten rewarded. He may have gotten attention for certain behaviors. So sometimes dogs do like certain behaviors and they got attention for it. So that could be something. So my dog recently started to rub his, it started off with just being a bit itchy, but rubbing his butt on the ground. And then I saw that became a bit of a, he got worming, he's all on worming. So he was medically, he was totally fine, but it started to become an attention-seeking behavior. So we kind of sort of cut that off a little bit. So it's probably worth kind of, again, the sequence of events is often what will tell you what was before this thing happened, when the actual behavior happened, and what happened immediately after. That often gives you a real good context. So if you take like 3-4 minute videos and then watch them, you quite often get the answer. We have a 19-month-old female cavoodle who is very bird reactive. How would you change this behavior? Look, I would probably, it's probably something she may have started in puppy or in teenage years, and then gets such a high out of birds. And I guess what you mean with reactivism, she might chase them. Here's another one. So yes, I would teach my dog obedience. I would teach them to hold a mat down, stay up, but I would also introduce while there are birds around. So I teach obedience foundations that I then put into the situation with higher distractions for such as birds. But let's say before I get to birds, I want my dog to be able, for example, to hold the dog stay at a downstay when their favorite person comes with a whole bag full of treats through the door or comes home from work or so. Like kind of, you don't want to go from like, oh, just can hold like a sort of semi-optimal downstay on the mat to like then practicing that in the park under with a whole flock of birds around it. So kind of you need to build it up. I also teach them a leave it command. So again, obedience to hold it together, a leave it command. I do settling exercises with them. So for example, I teach them to be tied up, and then I tie them up when we go for a lunch somewhere, and there might be like a couple of birds nearby. So she kind of, I tell her leave it, and then I reward her for that. So I kind of also teach her like she doesn't have the opportunity to chase birds. I like to introduce things like tug-of-war play. So I can give my dog a little bit of a opportunity to release that seeking of dopamine in a more sensible way, where they engage with me. So I usually don't do ball play instead, because the ball is about throwing the reward away from you, and you have very little control over your dog's mind as they are in the pursuit of the ball when they get it. But tug-of-war, I think, is a great way to release some of that, or to get the dog to chase some of this dopamine with me being part of the picture. So for example, I would then teach her, hey, if you leave the bird, you're going to play with me. And actually my play with you is much better than the bird. So there's toys like they're called flirt poles. So where you can put, or you even can put like a tuck toy. And a lot of dogs like toys that that have like either real or fake fur on them, so they're often amazing. And then you put them on a leash, and you drag them on the floor a little bit like a rabbit or a snake. So we get into this chasing instinct a little bit. Yes, the recording will be sent to you. Then Lisa is asking, my 9-month-old male pup has just started hiding from when given a command he does not want to do in your crowd. Advice on manage him hiding from you. Look, maybe go back to like retraining the commands. Sometimes you can start again on the baby steps and make them. There might be a bit of conflict. Sometimes you see these conflicts coming up at a point where we think the dog has understood the command, but they actually are not 100% clear. Or something else aversive might have happened that we didn't even notice, because for us it wasn't really something aversive, but in the dog's mind it may have been. So kind of, I would probably go back to the baby steps of training these commands, and I would start with a blank slate, would make it highly rewarding. So, wow, you're gonna get raw steak for your command call. That was amazing. You are the bestest puppy. And kind of retrain these commands in a very positive way, because again, you are trying to override also a little bit of that negative association your dog has. You can also try and retrain the command, but using a different command instead, if you find like it's just going to take a little bit too long or it gets a bit weird. So there is different ways, but again, you will also probably see when you sometimes it's also that we have reinforced, we have rewarded a very slow command call. So a client of mine, they had a Kelpie, and he taught his Kelpie to sit, and what he taught the Kelpie was to teach. He actually taught his dog the slowest sit on the planet, and I don't think he really wanted to do that, but this is what happened, and the dog pattern what got rewarded. So, and because he kept rewarding the slow sits, And his dog was like, okay, do you want me to sit slow? You want me to sit slower and slower and slower? So it looked like very creepy when the dog said, so we kind of retrained that a little bit. So yeah, there is this. Celine has a dog, reactive Belgian Malinois, adopted from the shelter with no history, already spayed, who I believe is now going through adolescence. Her reactivity to dogs some days is a lot worse than others. Yeah, and she has become reactive to movement animals on the TV. Is the increase in reactivity related to her adolescence? That could as well be, could also be related to look, we would need to see what happened before and when the reactivity started and how, but it can be very, very well be that was related to the adolescence. In terms of management, is there anything else I can be using? 4-3, click when seeing a dog, give a treat when she looks at me. There is, you might want to look up, there is, yeah, you're doing the engagement, disengagement protocol, I think. What I would do is potentially you could also contact a trainer in your area to see if they can help you work a little bit with being able to work with the dogs with some calm dogs that help with setup, so where you can teach walking past other dogs, so certain behavior patterns. What I also find very helpful is, in a sense, with reactivity, and especially with adolescent dog, is to teach them that I'm the one who makes the decision. So for example, if another dog approaches my dog or we are on a walk, I might say, hey, leave that, and we move on. I change direction. I want my dog to follow me. So I often do things where if another dog approaches, I'm not saying I put myself in front of the dog, but I really want them to understand that I will be managing that situation. So reactivity is a big topic in itself, but yes, the hormones are probably might not be on your side, and depending on if this is a fear behavior, this desexing at a certain time potentially could have made it a little bit worse. So yeah, maybe I sometimes also find for dogs, if they are sort of social with some dogs, maybe also getting them to understand, hey, not all other dogs are bad, like, maybe play with some of them. Also, Malinois is a dog that has an opinion about things, and they are pretty strong-willed. They are super smart. So also see a little bit if the reactivity is just fear-based, or if there are certain things where you also see the Malinois as such coming out a little bit. Sometimes, like German Shepherds, for example, they have a tendency to be more reactive than some other breeds. So just because they are German Shepherd and they like to manage things, and they walk around like being the sheriff. So that is so kind of they have an opinion about things. All right, Catherine has a 9-month-old dog with a Bordeaux. Oh, lovely. Who now anticipates us taking her by the collar to do a reset circle when she misbehaves, as shown by our dog trainer, and stands back and barks at us, making it impossible to get her on the collar. I think she now knows it's a game. How do we reprimand her mouthy behavior if we can't catch her without becoming a game? Yeah, so probably what I would do is I would crate train her. I would put a drag leash on her, so she would wear a collar and let's say a leash that is about, it's very hard to see here, but a leash that might be about 1 meter long for a Dogo Bordeaux that size, and has the loop, the handle cut off at the end. And she's going to drag this leash at home. So you might even start with a 1.50 meter leash, and she drags it at home. And then, if you stand there and she starts, she goes for your arm, for example, you give her one chance, say, leave it, also provided you have trained a leave it command. So I'll give her a chance to correct her behavior. If she doesn't, I'll grab the drag leash and I'm like, dude, you got to go in your crate. You lost your liberty right now, and you can sit there for an hour. So I'm pretty consequent with that. I don't like big dogs really putting there at a very young age being too mousy or so. I like them to know that there is boundaries to it. Do all dogs go through the terrible teens? Bronwyn, maybe you are just a lucky one. I don't know what breed you have. Maybe you're just some dogs, you might not ever know that they went through the teens. So well done, good on you and your dog. You might just be the lucky one. And then Lisa, my Cocker Spaniel pup, has started aggressively attacking my feet. When I walk, I try to manage this by giving him a command and a treat, but he does go straight back to attack. So I wonder if your pup, like just based on, and I'm saying, like, guys, with all of what I'm saying here, I might be entirely off. It's very hard for me to judge just on a line of copy, on a verbal description without seeing the behaviors. Yeah, this sounds like there's potentially been built a behavior chain where she attacks your feet, you tell her don't do it, and she gets a treaty for that. So she learned that attacking your feet gets you to say leave it, and she then gets a treat. So in her mind, this is how it works. So look, what I probably would do is I would see if, maybe changing sides works, but I would also teach her to walk on a loose leash. So loose leash next to me, and every time she tries to put her head down to attack my feet, I lift her head up, and I'm like, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. And then as she tries to put her head down, you say, leave it, and then she gets a treat for not pursuing that action. So she learns there is also, I would also reward her a lot when you walk her on leash. So when she has the head up in a normal position, for example, next to your knee somewhere. So we kind of stop the old behavior from happening. We tell her, hey, this is not what we want. And we also build a new behavior where we teach her how to properly walk on leash. I think there's just been a behavior, we call them behavior chain. It's just something happened over time that shouldn't have been like that or shouldn't have ended there. And Karen, oh, thank you so much, Karen. That's lovely here. Brilliant webinar, so many light bulb moments. I'll try to implement everything you've suggested. I'm very glad to hear that, Karen. So I think that's all. Guys, if there's no more other questions, then I really thank you for your attendance. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar as much as I did. And enjoy your dogs. They are not terrible. They just need a little bit of help to get through this period, and lots of patience will be your friend. Thank you so much, and we'll follow up tomorrow with an email with a link to the recording, and there will also be a little online survey, so we appreciate if you can give us some feedback. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.